My wife's double life, the shocking truth I never saw coming. My wife Sarah and I have been together for almost 12 years now. We got married young, too young, some would say, but we were in love, and it felt right at the time. We had a good life together. Or at least, I thought we did. We both worked hard, though she only worked part-time, leaving her with more free time than me. I didn't think much of it, you know. I trusted her completely. But lately, things had started to feel off. There was a distance growing between us. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. She had become more irritable, dismissive even. She'd get defensive over the smallest things, and she'd brush me off whenever I tried to ask if something was bothering her. I thought maybe she was just stressed. We've all been there, right? But there was more to it than just mood swings. She started staying out late more often, blaming it on girls' nights or errands that conveniently stretched late into the evening. I told myself I was being paranoid. We've all heard those stories of people who let their jealousy get the better of them and wreck their relationships. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the husband who couldn't trust his wife. But as the weeks went by, it was like this invisible wall had gone up between us, and it was getting harder to ignore. The first real red flag came when I found a strange receipt in her purse. It was for a fancy dinner at some high-end restaurant, one that I've never been to, and certainly not with her. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying it was from a work dinner. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But something wasn't adding up. I tried to push it out of my mind, but then came the phone calls. Late at night, she'd get these mysterious calls and texts, which she always took outside or in another room. When I asked her who it was, she'd claim it was just a friend or make excuses that didn't quite hold up. I wasn't sure what to do at that point. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just seeing things that weren't there. That's where things stood, for now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I just didn't know how wrong, yet. Alright, let me pick up where I left off. Things were really starting to eat at me after I found that receipt and noticed all those late-night calls. The nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away, but I still didn't have any concrete proof that something was wrong. All I had were small, suspicious signs. Part of me wanted to confront her, but the other part, the part that had loved her for over a decade, kept making excuses. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore. One night, she said she was going out with her friends for a girls' night. At first, it sounded like the same story she'd been giving for weeks. I didn't ask questions, didn't press her for details. I mean, she'd earned my trust over the years, right? But something was different this time. She left the house dressed up, more than usual. Now, don't get me wrong, Sarah's always been someone who takes pride in how she looks, but this was over the top. A dress I'd never seen before, heels she never wore, and the perfume, God, it was so strong it practically filled the entire house even after she left. That was my second red flag of the night. I shrugged it off at first, trying not to let my paranoia get the best of me. But after a few hours of sitting alone on the couch, I couldn't take it anymore. My mind kept racing back to the receipt, the phone calls, the late nights. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I opened her laptop. Now, I had no idea what I was even looking for. I'm not exactly tech savvy, but I thought maybe, just maybe, there'd be something to calm my nerves. Something to prove I was just being a paranoid idiot. But what I found did the exact opposite. There, in her search history, was a map to a location about 20 minutes from our house. I hadn't seen it before, and it wasn't some restaurant or bar. It was just an address, no name or business, just a location pin. My heart sank. I knew I had two choices: ignore it and try to pretend everything was fine, or find out for myself what the hell was going on. I grabbed my keys and left the house without even thinking. I was running on pure adrenaline at that point. The drive there felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I was replaying all the little signs in my head, the dress, the perfume, the way she'd been acting so distant lately. By the time I pulled up to the address, my hands were shaking. It was a dimly lit building, and to my shock, it looked like, well, a shady place. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I watched from my car as people went in and out. Men. A lot of men. All looking like they were there for something more than a casual evening. And that's when I saw her. Sarah, my wife, walking out the front door with another man, laughing as they got into a car together. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even move. My entire world crashed down in that moment. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I had a plan brewing in the back of my mind. Something she'd never see coming. And this was only the beginning. After seeing her walk out of that building, I was frozen in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, but my body felt paralyzed. I wanted to storm out, confront her right then and there, but something stopped me. I knew if I did that, she'd deny it, twist it, and somehow, I'd end up being the bad guy. That's how she was. Sarah could lie her way out of anything, and I'd seen it before, even in small arguments. She had a way of turning things around so fast, it made your head spin. So I drove home. Every second of that drive felt like torture. By the time I walked through the front door, I felt like I was living in some twisted alternate reality. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted, was living a completely different life. And I didn't even know how deep it went yet. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to figure out my next move. I wasn't ready to confront her without more proof. My gut told me this wasn't just a one-time thing with some random guy, it felt bigger, more calculated. But I couldn't accuse her without knowing for sure. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I did something I never thought I'd do, I started going through her things. I checked her phone when she was in the shower, scanned her emails when she left her laptop open. At first, I didn't find anything, and I almost started to believe that maybe what I saw that night was just some misunderstanding. But then, one night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was taking a call in another room. I saw an app I'd never noticed before. It looked like a normal messaging app, but I knew it wasn't one we'd ever used. I clicked on it, and that's when everything unraveled. Messages. Dozens of them. From different men. And it wasn't just casual flirting or some emotional affair. No, this was explicit. Clear arrangements for meetups. There were dates, times, and even payments. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach twisting into knots as I realized what I was reading. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was working, selling herself. That shady building I saw her at wasn't just some bar. It was a brothel. I almost threw up right there in the kitchen. I felt like the world was crashing down around me, but at the same time, this weird, cold numbness washed over me. It was like everything in our marriage, the lies, the distance, the defensiveness, it all made sense now. She had been living a double life, right under my nose, and I had been completely blind to it. But still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I knew if I did, she'd just spin it somehow, make it seem like I was being paranoid, maybe even tell me I misunderstood what I saw. No, I needed something more. Something solid. And that's when the plan started forming in my head. I'd been betrayed, humiliated, and lied to for God knows how long. But I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. No, I was going to get my revenge. But it wasn't going to be the kind of revenge she expected. I had an idea, one that would leave her just as shocked and blindsided as I felt. And that's when I made the decision. I was going to call her for one of those nights. Her own husband. And when she walked through that door, she'd have no idea what was coming. After finding out the truth, that Sarah was working at a brothel and cheating on me with multiple men, I felt like I was living in some twisted nightmare. But instead of confronting her right away, I did something that shocked even me. I decided to play along with her lies for just a little longer. I needed time to plan my next move, and I wasn't going to let her know I was onto her. Not yet. I kept up appearances, acting like the same clueless, loving husband I'd always been. I'd kiss her on the cheek when she left for her so-called girls' nights and ask how her day was when she got back from work. But inside, I was seething. The betrayal cut deeper with every passing day, but I kept it bottled up. I wasn't ready to explode yet. I started tracking her movements more closely. With the help of a few apps and some GPS tricks, I could see where she was going. Most of the time, she was at that same shady building, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for a quick visit. It was sickening to watch, but it also confirmed everything I needed to know. This wasn't just an affair, it was a full-blown operation she had been hiding from me. One night, as I was sitting at home alone, waiting for her to come back, I scrolled through the messages I'd found on her phone again. Each message felt like a punch to the gut, but this time, instead of getting angrier, I felt a strange calm wash over me. That's when the plan really started to come together. You see, Sarah was so confident that she had me fooled. She thought I was completely in the dark, and that's what made this next part so perfect. She had no idea what was coming. I knew I couldn't just confront her and blow up the whole situation. She was too good at lying, too quick to twist things around. I needed something bigger, something that would hit her where it hurt. And then it hit me, I could turn the tables on her in a way she'd never expect. That's when I decided I was going to call her for one of those appointments. The idea itself seemed insane at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. What better way to show her that I knew everything? What better way to make her realize just how deeply she had betrayed me? I wasn't just going to accuse her of cheating, I was going to catch her in the act, make her face the reality of what she'd done. So, I set the plan in motion. I reached out to her through one of the anonymous apps she used for her work. I knew she wouldn't recognize me, it wasn't like she used real names with her clients anyway. I set up a time, booked the appointment, and waited. When the day finally came, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I was equal parts nervous and furious, knowing what was about to happen. I had rented out a small hotel room on the outskirts of town, one that I knew she wouldn't suspect. I didn't want to confront her at home, it needed to be somewhere neutral, somewhere she'd feel completely out of her element. As I sat there in that room, waiting for her to show up, I went through every possible outcome in my head. What would she say when she realized it was me? Would she break down and admit everything? Would she lie again, even when caught red-handed? I had no idea how she'd react, but I knew one thing for sure, I was ready for this. Then, I heard a knock on the door. I stood up, my heart racing. This was it. The moment everything would come crashing down. I opened the door, and there she was. Sarah, standing there, dressed up in one of those outfits she thought I'd never see. She smiled at first, like she always did when she was about to meet a new client. But when her eyes met mine, the smile vanished in an instant. Her face went pale, and for the first time in all these months, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Hi, Sarah," I said, my voice cold and steady. Surprise. The look on her face was priceless, confusion, panic, and realization all hit her at once. She stood there frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. For a second, I thought she might faint. I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. "Why don't you come inside? We've got a lot to talk about." This was the moment I had been waiting for. She was trapped, and there was no way out now. I was finally in control, and it felt better than I ever could have imagined. I'll never forget the moment she stepped into that hotel room. Sarah was standing there, looking like she'd seen a ghost. The shock on her face was everything I'd imagined, but I wasn't ready for how it would hit me. Seeing her up close, dressed like that, knowing exactly why she was there, it made me sick to my stomach. But I wasn't about to let her see that. I had to keep calm. I had to be in control. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, staring at me like she was waiting for me to make the first move. Her usual confidence, that arrogant way she could talk her way out of anything, it was gone. "Are you going to say something?" I asked, breaking the silence. My voice was cold, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I could feel the tension in the room like a heavy weight pressing down on both of us. Finally, she spoke. I don't know what to say." Her voice was small, nothing like the Sarah I knew. I crossed my arms and leaned against the small table in the room. "How long?" I asked, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "How long have you been doing this?" She didn't answer right away. She was still trying to figure out what I knew, how much she could admit without making it worse for herself. But there was no easy way out of this one. "Look, it's not what you think," she started, but I cut her off. "Not what I think. You're standing here, in this room, ready to sell yourself. So, Sarah, I'm pretty sure it's exactly what I think." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to cry. But no tears came. Instead, she just looked down at the floor, avoiding my eyes. "It started a few months ago," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "A few months?" I repeated, my anger rising again. "That's a lie. I know it's been going on a lot longer than that." She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't in the mood for more of her games. "I know everything, Sarah. I know about the brothel. I know about the men. I've seen the messages. So don't stand there and insult my intelligence by pretending this is something new." Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, and for a second, I saw the old Sarah. The defensive, manipulative Sarah who could spin anything in her favor. "I needed the money," she said, her voice sharp. "Do you think our life just pays for itself? Do you think all those trips, the gifts, the bills, you think I was just working part-time for fun?" The nerve of her. Trying to turn this around on me. "You're really going to stand there and try to make this my fault?" I asked, my voice rising. "I've worked my ass off to support this family. I've sacrificed everything for us, and you're going to act like I pushed you into this?" Her expression hardened. "You don't know what it's been like for me," she said bitterly. "You have no idea." "And whose fault is that?" I shot back. "You didn't even give me a chance to be there for you. You just went behind my back, living this double life. You lied to me, over and over again." She folded her arms, her face twisting in anger. "You weren't around. You were always working, always busy with your own life. I had to find a way to take care of things on my own." That hit a nerve. I had been working to build a future for us. But to her, it was just an excuse. She was never going to take responsibility for what she did. "Then why not leave me?" I asked, almost pleading. "If you were so unhappy, why didn't you just end it? Why this?" She shook her head, tears finally welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want to leave you. I just got in too deep. And once it started, I couldn't stop." I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, realizing how much of a stranger she had become to me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to let all the anger and betrayal explode out of me. But I held it in. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "It's too late to stop now." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We're done, Sarah. This marriage, whatever it was, it's over. I'll be filing for divorce. You can keep doing whatever it is you've been doing, but you won't be doing it as my wife. The words hung in the air between us. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight for something, but the fire in her eyes had burned out. She just nodded slowly, almost as if she had been expecting this. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it felt hollow. Too little, too late. I stood up straight, walking past her toward the door. "You can leave," I said without turning back. "I don't want to see you again. I'll have the papers sent to you." And with that, I opened the door and stepped out, leaving her standing alone in the room. As I walked away, a strange sense of relief washed over me. This wasn't how I thought my marriage would end, but in that moment, I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't live with someone who had betrayed me so completely. And now, it was time to start thinking about what my life would look like without her. But there was still more to deal with. She wasn't going to go quietly, and I had a feeling things were about to get even messier. I'd like to say that after walking out of that hotel room, I felt free. I'd like to tell you that it was over, that Sarah was just a chapter one could close, but life doesn't wrap up that easily, does it? The days after the confrontation were oddly silent. Sarah didn't call, didn't text, nothing. You'd think after everything I uncovered, she'd be fighting, trying to explain or deny it, but there was just silence. I couldn't help but feel like something was missing, something wasn't quite right. It wasn't like her to just go quiet. About a week later, I was at work when I got a call. The number was unfamiliar, but I picked it up anyway. "Hello." I answered, expecting some telemarketer or scam call. "Is this James?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost nervous. "Yeah, this is James." "Who's this?" I asked, feeling a pit form in my stomach. "This is Emily, Sarah's sister. I'm not sure if you've heard, but I need to talk to you about Sarah." My heart immediately sank. "What's going on? What happened?" Emily hesitated for a long second, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Sarah's sick, James. Really sick. She's been diagnosed with an STD. It's serious." My blood ran cold. I could barely process what she was saying. An STD? My wife? I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Wait, what do you mean? What kind of?" I stammered, my mind spinning. "How long has she known?" "I don't know all the details," Emily said softly. "She only told me recently. But it's bad, James. Really bad. She's in the hospital now. I think she's too scared to call you." I was speechless. Part of me was furious, so angry, because I already knew where this was going. This disease didn't just come from nowhere. It came from her cheating, from those nights with other men. And now I was being dragged into it. Did she say if? I mean, am I at risk too? I asked, the fear creeping into my voice. Should I? Emily didn't have an answer. I'm not sure. I just thought you needed to know. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. Sarah had an STD. This whole time, while she was lying to me, sneaking around, sleeping with other men, she had been carrying something with her, something she had never bothered to tell me about. And now she was in the hospital because of it. I should have been angry. Hell, I was angry. But beneath that rage was a gnawing sense of betrayal that went even deeper than before. This wasn't just about her cheating anymore. This was about my health. My life. She had put me at risk without even thinking twice. I drove to the hospital, my mind a blur of anger, fear, and confusion. When I got there, Emily was waiting for me in the lobby. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "She's in room 312, she said quietly, without asking why I'd come. We both knew this wasn't something that could wait any longer. I walked into the room, and there she was, Sarah, lying in the hospital bed, pale and weak. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "How long?" I asked, my voice rough, barely able to keep the anger at bay. Sarah looked down at her hands, her lips trembling. "A while," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you." "A while?" I repeated, my heart pounding. "You've been carrying this around, and you didn't think I deserved to know. You've been sleeping with other men, putting me at risk, and you didn't bother to tell me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "Not this time. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had," she said weakly, her voice breaking. "I was scared." "Scared?" I spat, unable to hold back. "You weren't scared when you were out there with other men. You weren't scared when you were lying to my face. You were only scared when it finally caught up to you." Her tears started falling, but it didn't soften the rage boiling inside me. "I didn't know it would get this bad," she sobbed. "I didn't think." "Of course you didn't," I cut her off. "You didn't think about anything. Not me, not us, not the life we built together. All you thought about was yourself." She didn't argue, didn't even try to defend herself. She just sat there, wiping her tears, too broken to put up the fight I was so used to seeing in her. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in my chest. "Am I infected?" I asked quietly, the fear in my voice creeping back. "Do I have it too?" Sarah shook her head, but I wasn't convinced. "You should get tested," she whispered. "I don't know. I don't think I gave it to you, but I'm not sure." That uncertainty hit me like a truck. The woman I had loved, the woman I had spent over a decade with, had not only betrayed me emotionally but might have endangered my health. And now, she was too deep in her mess to even know if she'd infected me too. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to release all the anger and pain that had built up over these last few weeks. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the person I thought I knew, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. "I'm going to get tested," I said finally, my voice cold. "And if I'm positive, Sarah, there's no coming back from this." She didn't say anything. She just nodded, wiping her face, looking as small and fragile as I'd ever seen her. But I wasn't ready to feel sympathy. "Not yet. I'll have the divorce papers ready soon," I added, turning toward the door. "Whatever happens next, you're on your own." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the mess she had created. But even as I left, I couldn't shake the fear that she had already taken more from me than just my trust. I spent the next few days in a state of limbo, waiting for the test results. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would jump into my throat. It was all I could think about, whether or not Sarah had infected me. It felt like my entire future hinged on those results. The anger, the betrayal, it all took a back seat to the fear of what she might have left me with. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep. My life had become this endless loop of waiting, playing out every worst-case scenario in my head. What if I was positive? What if I'd have to live with this for the rest of my life? What if this nightmare was going to follow me long after Sarah was gone? And then, the call came. I was sitting at my desk when I saw the clinic's number flash across my screen. My hand shook as I picked up the phone. "Hello." "Hi, is this James?" the nurse on the other end asked, her tone calm and professional. "Yes, it's me," I replied, my voice barely steady. "I'm calling with your test results," she continued, pausing for what felt like an eternity. "The results came back negative. You're not infected." I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. Relief flooded through me, so powerful it almost knocked me back in my chair. I wasn't sick. I wasn't carrying the weight of Sarah's betrayal in that way, at least. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. After I hung up the phone, I just sat there, staring at the screen. I should have felt nothing but relief. I wasn't sick. I didn't have to carry this disease with me for the rest of my life. But instead of pure relief, there was something else there, anger. Sarah had gambled with my health, my life, and she hadn't even had the decency to tell me. She'd been hiding this for months, letting me live in ignorance while she snuck around, putting me at risk. And now that I was in the clear, that anger bubbled to the surface. I couldn't let her get away with it. That evening, I decided to confront her one last time. This wasn't about trying to fix things, I was past that. This was about closure. About getting the truth, the real truth, not the half-hearted excuses she'd fed me in the hospital. I drove to the hospital where she was still being treated. Emily had told me she was staying a bit longer to recover, but I hadn't planned on seeing her again. Not until now. As I walked down the hallway toward her room, my mind raced with everything I wanted to say, everything I needed to say. When I pushed open the door, Sarah was sitting up in bed, looking better than when I'd last seen her. She was surprised to see me, her eyes widening as I stepped inside. "James?" she asked, her voice tentative, almost hopeful. I didn't sit down. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, staring at her. "I got my test results back," I said flatly. Her face paled slightly, and she bit her lip. "And? I'm not sick," I said, my voice hard. "I'm clear." For a moment, she looked relieved. "I'm glad," she whispered, but I wasn't in the mood for her false sympathy. "Sarah, how long were you going to keep this from me?" I asked, my tone sharp. "How long were you going to let me live in the dark, not knowing what you'd been doing behind my back? What you'd been risking?" She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to hate me." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Hate you? Sarah, this isn't about hating you. This is about the fact that you lied, over and over. You put me at risk. You put our life at risk. For what? Because you were scared? Because you wanted to hide from the consequences?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't care this time. I was past the point of sympathy. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you. I know I can't take that back. But I didn't know how to get out of it. I was trapped." "You weren't trapped," I snapped. "You made choices. You chose to cheat, you chose to lie, and you chose to put me in danger. That's not being trapped, Sarah. That's being selfish." She looked away, wiping her tears. "I didn't want to lose you." "You already did," I said, my voice cold. "The moment you decided to lie to me, you lost me." The room fell silent after that. She didn't try to argue, didn't try to defend herself anymore. Maybe she knew it was pointless. Maybe she was too tired to fight. Either way, I was done. "I've already started the divorce process," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll make sure the paperwork gets to you. But after that, we're done. I don't want to see you again. I don't want to talk to you. You're not part of my life anymore." She didn't look at me, just nodded weakly. "I understand," she whispered. I turned to leave, but before I stepped out of the room, I looked back at her one last time. The woman I'd once loved was now a stranger who had nearly destroyed me. "I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for," I said quietly. "But it's not me." And with that, I walked out of the room, out of her life, and out of the nightmare she had created. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could breathe again. It's strange, walking away from someone you spent over a decade with, someone you thought you knew better than anyone. As I drove home from the hospital that night, there was a heavy silence inside me. No more yelling, no more accusations. Just quiet. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the kind of quiet that feels hollow, like something's missing. For days after, I tried to pick up the pieces of my life. The divorce papers were in motion, and as far as I was concerned, Sarah was just a chapter in my life that I was ready to close. But of course, things were never going to be that simple. One evening, about a week after I saw Sarah for the last time, I got another phone call. This time, it was from Emily again. "James, I'm really sorry to call you again, but I need to tell you something," she said, her voice sounding even more strained than before. "Is this about Sarah?" I asked, already dreading what she was about to tell me. I thought I was done with all this, but life had other plans. "She's been released from the hospital," Emily began, and for a second, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe she was just updating me. But then she added, "She's not doing well mentally. I think she's really struggling." I didn't know what to say. I'd cut Sarah out of my life. I didn't want to be dragged back in. But something in Emily's voice stopped me from hanging up. "She's been trying to reach out to you," Emily continued. "But she's scared. She knows she's burned every bridge, and she doesn't expect anything from you, but she wanted you to know something." I clenched my jaw, bracing myself. "What now?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. Emily paused, and then she dropped the bombshell. "She's pregnant, James." The words hit me like a freight train. Pregnant? I felt the world spin for a moment. Pregnant. That meant, it could be mine. Or, just as easily, it could be someone else's. My mind raced through the months of betrayal, of her sleeping with other men. What was the timeline? How far along was she? I couldn't even think straight. "Whose is it?" I asked bluntly, the only question that mattered in that moment. "She doesn't know," Emily said quietly, confirming my worst fear. "She's about a month along. It could be yours, or, well, you know." I gripped the edge of the counter in my kitchen, trying to steady myself. This was supposed to be over. This nightmare, this betrayal, it was supposed to end with the divorce. But now? Now everything was more complicated than ever. "James," Emily's voice broke through my spinning thoughts. "I know this is the last thing you wanted to hear. But she's not asking for anything. She just wanted you to know the truth. She doesn't even know if you'd want to be involved." I didn't answer right away. What could I even say? My mind was a mess of emotions, anger, confusion, even sadness. After everything Sarah had done, after all the lies, the cheating, the disease she'd kept secret, now she might be carrying my child. It was too much. Too much to process. "I need time," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do with this, Emily." "I understand," she replied gently. "Take whatever time you need. But I think Sarah's hoping you'll at least get a paternity test when the time comes. If it's yours, well. I think she knows she doesn't deserve anything from you, but she still thought you had a right to know." After I told Emily I'd get the test, I spent the next few days in deep thought. The weight of it all felt unbearable: Sarah's lies, the possibility of a child, the endless questions that still haunted me. I couldn't shake the image of that hospital room, seeing Sarah lying there, vulnerable, after everything she'd done. But the more I thought about it, the more one thing became clear: I had a choice. A choice to either let this situation control my life, or to finally take control myself. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to take the test. For weeks, I had let Sarah's lies, betrayals, and deceit consume my life. I had lived in this storm of anger, hurt, and confusion. But I wasn't willing to let that continue any longer. This child, if it was mine, would have been conceived in the middle of the worst time of my life, a time built on deception and pain. And if it wasn't mine, I would have been dragged into a mess that wasn't my responsibility. Either way, Sarah had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. I was done. I called Emily one last time. I'm not doing the test, I told her, my voice steady. I'm done with this, with Sarah, with everything. I don't want any more involvement. I'm cutting all ties. Emily sighed on the other end of the line. I understand, James. I really do. This has been a lot. I won't push you. Thanks, Emily, I said, grateful that she didn't try to convince me otherwise. Tell her whatever you need to, but from now on, I don't want any contact. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. No more lies. No more wondering if she was still sneaking around. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was free. I wasn't going to let Sarah's betrayal define the rest of my life. Over the next few weeks, I started focusing on myself again, something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had forgotten about, and most importantly, I began to feel like me again. It was amazing how much lighter life felt without the constant weight of Sarah's secrets hanging over me. I found joy in the little things, grabbing coffee with friends, spending more time at the gym, going on spontaneous weekend trips. I even started taking some extra courses in photography, something I'd always been interested in but never found the time for. It was like I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of a marriage that had turned toxic long before I realized. And then, something incredible happened. I started dating again. I wasn't sure if I was ready at first. After everything with Sarah, trust was hard to rebuild. But slowly, I opened myself up to the idea. I went on a few casual dates, nothing serious, just getting back into the world. It felt good to laugh again, to share parts of myself with someone who wasn't wrapped up in lies and betrayal. One of those dates, though, turned out to be different. Her name was Rachel, and from the moment we sat down for coffee, I knew there was something special about her. She was kind, genuine, and completely unlike anyone I had been with before. There were no games, no hidden agendas. Just real conversations, real connection. It wasn't long before things between us became more serious. For the first time in years, I found myself in a relationship that felt healthy, easy, and, most importantly, honest. Rachel knew about my past with Sarah. I didn't hide any of it from her. But instead of judging me or feeling sorry for me, she listened, understood, and helped me move on in ways I didn't think were possible. Life wasn't perfect, far from it. But it was mine again. I had taken control back, refused to let Sarah's betrayal consume my future. I was happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't been in years. Every day felt like a new start, a new chapter that I was writing on my own terms. As for Sarah, I never heard from her again. Whether she had the baby, whether it was mine, I didn't know, and I didn't care. That part of my life was over, sealed off like a chapter in a book I had no intention of reopening. I had done my grieving, gone through the anger, and now I was free to live my life on my terms. And that was the best decision I ever made. I learned that sometimes, the only way to truly move forward is to let go of the things that are holding you back, no matter how hard or messy it may seem. And that's exactly what I did. So here I am now, living a life that's mine again. And I'm happier than I've been in years. It took time, and it wasn't easy, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we always have the power to take back control of our own story.